Yeah, nobody set out to destroy you. You destroyed yourselves in this country with your ludicrous, hypocritical behaviour. The truth be told, what you just said is complete and utter garbage.
Piers Morgan has consistently accused Meghan Markle of deliberately crafting a victim narrative to manipulate public perception, reframe her departure from the royal family, and leverage her status for unprecedented media influence and financial gain. As a former tabloid editor and outspoken media personality, Morgan has used his platforms, particularly on Good Morning Britain, and later on his show Piers Morgan Uncensored, to challenge the authenticity of Meghan's story, arguing that her portrayal of herself as isolated, misunderstood, and mistreated is less about truth and more about strategic image management. Morgan contends that Meghan, a former actress with a background in public relations and media performance, entered the royal spotlight with full awareness of its pressures, yet chose to present herself as unprepared and overwhelmed. She didn't fall into fame, he has said. She spent years building a career in entertainment, where narrative control is everything. Then she marries into the royal family and acts like the scrutiny came as a surprise? That's not innocence, that's opportunism. He argues that Meghan and Prince Harry's 2020 decision to step back as senior royals was not an escape from oppression, but a calculated rebranding designed to monetize their story. They didn't give up royal life, Morgan insists. They gave up accountability and launched a global brand. Now they answer to Netflix, not the Queen, and their content is all about how hard their life used to be. He frequently highlights the couple's multi-million-dollar deals with major media companies, calling their narrative of seeking privacy the biggest PR paradox in history. Morgan reserves his harshest criticism for the couple's 2021 interview with Oprah Winfrey, which he dismissed as a highly produced, emotionally charged infomercial, disguised as a journalistic expose. He zeroed in on Meghan's revelation that she experienced suicidal thoughts while a working royal, questioning why she never sought formal help at the time if the crisis was so severe. If you're truly suicidal, you don't keep it secret for years and then reveal it in a primetime broadcast worth hundreds of millions, he said. That's not healing, that's branding. He has also challenged the claim that a senior royal expressed concern about the skin tone of her and Harry's unborn child, demanding evidence and calling the allegation the most extraordinary accusation in royal history, delivered with zero proof. His refusal to accept the claim without corroboration led to a record-breaking 57,000-plus complaints to Ofcom and ultimately contributed to his departure from Good Morning Britain. Yet Morgan stood by his position, framing it as a defense of journalistic integrity and skepticism in an age of uncritical celebrity worship. On his current show, Morgan continues to dissect Meghan's public appearances, interviews, and documentaries, often inviting guests who support his view that she is not a victim but a savvy operator who has mastered the art of emotional storytelling for maximum impact. She's not being persecuted, he said in a 2024 episode. She's being paid very well to tell a story that paints her as persecuted. There's a difference. While Morgan's critics accuse him of misogyny, insensitivity, and racial bias, particularly in how he dismisses discussions of race and mental health, his supporters see him as one of the few public figures willing to question celebrity narratives without deference. They argue that holding powerful individuals accountable, especially those profiting from personal trauma, is not cruelty, it's necessary.
Yeah, what has he done with this Netflix series? He's used his mother to sell it. Could there be a more grotesque exploitation or a more...
Piers Morgan has emerged as one of the most vocal and persistent critics of Meghan Markle, using a range of media platforms including television, podcasts, and social media to challenge the authenticity of her public narrative and scrutinize her portrayal in the global press. Over several years, Morgan has consistently questioned the sincerity of Meghan's claims about her experience within the royal family, arguing that her depiction as a misunderstood, isolated, and emotionally distressed figure is carefully constructed to generate sympathy, justify her exit from royal duties, and support a highly lucrative post-royal media career. On his former ITV program, Good Morning Britain, Morgan frequently engaged in heated debates about Meghan's interviews, particularly the 2021 CBS special with Oprah Winfrey. He openly expressed disbelief in key aspects of her testimony, including her assertion that she experienced suicidal thoughts while a working royal but received no support. If you're having thoughts of ending your life, Morgan argued, you don't keep it to yourself for years and then reveal it in a billion-dollar media deal. That's not a cry for help, that's a calculated disclosure. His refusal to accept her account without verifiable proof sparked widespread backlash, leading to a record-breaking 57,000-plus complaints to Ofcom, the UK's broadcasting regulator, and ultimately contributing to his departure from the show. Undeterred, Morgan continued his critique on his current platform, Piers Morgan Uncensored, where he regularly dissects Meghan's media appearances, documentaries, and public statements. He juxtaposes clips from her Netflix series and interviews with commentary from journalists, royal experts, and critics, highlighting what he sees as contradictions between her words and and actions. For example, he frequently points out that Meghan claims to want privacy while simultaneously participating in high-profile interviews, releasing a tell-all memoir, The Bench and Contributions to Harry's Spare, and starring in a multi-episode Netflix documentary. You can't say you're overwhelmed by media attention and then sign a $100 million content deal, Morgan says. That's not an exit from the spotlight, that's a hostile takeover of it. Morgan also challenges the narrative of systemic racism within the royal family, particularly the claim that a senior royal expressed concern about how dark her and Harry's child's skin might be. While he maintains that racism should always be taken seriously, he has repeatedly demanded evidence for the allegation, calling it the most explosive accusation in royal history, delivered with zero witnesses, no names, and no documentation. He argues that such a claim without corroboration undermines the credibility of more substantiated discussions about race and prejudice. Beyond the specifics, Morgan's broader critique centers on what he sees as a growing trend of celebrity activism, where personal suffering is packaged and monetized. He does not deny that Meghan faced intense media scrutiny, some of it undoubtedly unfair and racially charged, but insists that her response has been less about reform and more about repositioning herself as a global influencer with a moral platform. "I don't blame her for wanting out," Morgan has said, "but don't sell your pain for profit and then claim you're doing it all for impact or change." Supporters of Morgan praise his willingness to push back against what they see as uncritical media adulation and emotional manipulation. They view him as a rare voice willing to apply journalistic skepticism to celebrity narratives, especially when vast sums of money and public influence are at stake. However, many critics accuse him of misogyny, racial insensitivity, and double standards, noting that he has rarely applied the same level of scrutiny to white male public figures or members of the royal family. Advocates for Meghan argue that his tone often crosses into cruelty, particularly when dismissing disclosures of mental health struggles and racial microaggressions. Ultimately, Morgan's sustained criticism reflects a deeper cultural divide. In an age where personal trauma is shared publicly and turned into content, where advocacy and branding often overlap, the lines between authenticity and performance have blurred. By relentlessly questioning Meghan's story, Morgan forces a difficult but necessary conversation about truth, accountability, and who controls the narrative when fame, power, and pain intersect. Whether one sees him as a truth-teller or a provocateur, his role in shaping the public debate around Meghan Markle remains undeniable. Ultimately, Morgan's campaign against Meghan Markle transcends one woman or one interview. It reflects a deeper cultural tension. In an era where personal pain is shared publicly, packaged for profit, and amplified by global media, how do we distinguish genuine advocacy from manufactured victimhood? And who gets to decide? For Morgan, the answer is simple: believe people, but verify their claims. And in Meghan's case, he believes the story doesn't hold up under scrutiny.
Greatest whinges and a load of self-congratulatory nonsense. Harry and Meghan sold their royal souls to become reality TV stars.
He called the whole thing fake. Not just in a, ooh, she's being dramatic way, but in a, this is a full-blown performance kind of way.
Yeah, what has he done with this Netflix series? He's used it.
Piers Morgan's uncensored take on Meghan Markle has become one of the most polarizing and widely discussed commentaries in modern media discourse. On his show, Piers Morgan Uncensored, he delivers a no-holds-barred critique of the Duchess of Sussex, zeroing in on the controversies surrounding her public persona, her departure from royal life, and the broader challenges to her credibility in the court of public opinion. Morgan doesn't shy away from confrontation. His approach is direct, often combative, and rooted in a self-proclaimed commitment to journalistic skepticism, even when it comes at the cost of popularity. At the core of Morgan's argument is the belief that Meghan has carefully engineered a narrative of victimhood to justify her exit from the royal family and reposition herself as a global influencer and advocate, while simultaneously benefiting from immense privilege and financial reward. She didn't escape oppression, Morgan has said. She escaped accountability and then monetized the story. He points to the couple's multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix, Spotify, and Penguin Random House as evidence that their much-publicized desire for privacy is fundamentally at odds with their actions. You don't sign the biggest media contracts in royal history and then claim the press is destroying your life, he argues. That's not hypocrisy. That's a business model. Morgan revisits key moments in Meghan's public journey with forensic scrutiny. He questions the timing and framing of her revelations in the Oprah interview, particularly her disclosure of suicidal ideation, suggesting that such a serious mental health crisis would have required immediate intervention, not a years-long silence broken only in a globally televised broadcast. If you're truly in that dark a place, he insists, you don't wait until you've got a producer, a lighting crew, and a global audience to tell the world. You go to a doctor. or a hospital, not a soundstage. He also challenges the claim made by Prince Harry that a senior royal expressed concern about the skin tone of their unborn child. While Morgan states he is not defending racism in any form, he demands verifiable evidence for what he calls the most incendiary allegation ever made about the royal family. With no named source, no contemporaneous record, and no witnesses, Morgan dismisses it as an assertion, not a fact, and warns that unsubstantiated claims risk undermining legitimate conversations about race. Morgan further critiques Meghan's portrayal of her treatment by the British press, acknowledging that tabloids were often harsh and invasive, but arguing that she was hardly an innocent bystander. She didn't just fall into the royal spotlight, he says. She pursued Prince Harry after researching him online, leaked stories to the press early in their relationship, and gave interviews that contradicted royal norms, all while pretending to be blindsided by media attention. He contrasts her experience with that of other royals, like Princess Diana, who faced similar scrutiny but never left the institution or launched a global media brand off the back of her pain. What sets Morgan's commentary apart is his refusal to treat celebrity with reverence. He positions himself as a contrarian in an era of uncritical adoration, especially toward figures who blend activism with entertainment. Meghan's not being attacked for being a woman of color, he says. She's being questioned for telling a story that doesn't add up. That's not racism, that's accountability. His segments often feature heated debates with guests who defend Meghan, creating moments of high drama that fuel social media engagement. Clips of Morgan saying, "I don't believe her," have been shared millions of times, sometimes mocked, sometimes praised, becoming shorthand for a broader cultural divide. Critics accuse Morgan of being misogynistic, racially tone-deaf, and obsessed with tearing down a woman who has spoken out against institutional silence. They argue that his tone often veers into cruelty, and that he underestimates the psychological toll of systemic isolation and media abuse. Yet his supporters see him as one of the few public figures willing to ask difficult questions in an age of performative empathy and celebrity sanctification. They argue that public figures, especially those profiting from emotional storytelling, should be held to a higher standard of transparency. Ultimately, Morgan's uncensored focus on Meghan Markle transcends the individual. It reflects a larger societal reckoning with authenticity in the digital age, where personal trauma, advocacy, and branding increasingly overlap. Whether viewers see him as a necessary skeptic or a relentless antagonist, his commentary has undeniably shaped the global conversation, forcing audiences to confront uncomfortable questions. How much of Meghan's story is truth? How much is strategy? And in an era where narrative is power, who gets to decide what's real?
I say, I'm sorry, I don't believe you. But I was.
The show.
It was Meghan's way and Meghan's narrative and Meghan's truth. That phrase was actually used by Oprah Winfrey. This is your truth. What is that?
Piers Morgan has been unequivocal in his public skepticism toward Meghan Markle's mental health disclosures during her 2021 interview with Oprah Winfrey, famously stating, "I do not believe her," a declaration that sparked widespread controversy and became one of the most talked about media moments of the year. During the interview, Meghan revealed she had experienced intense emotional distress while a working member of the royal family, including feelings of isolation, lack of support, and suicidal thoughts, claims she said were met with institutional indifference. Morgan, known for his confrontational style and background as a former tabloid editor, challenged the credibility of those claims almost immediately. Speaking on Good Morning Britain, he expressed disbelief that someone experiencing such a severe mental health crisis would not seek professional help or be placed in protective care. If you're having suicidal thoughts, he argued, you don't keep it to yourself for years and then reveal it in a globally televised interview worth hundreds of millions of dollars. That's not a cry for help. That's a strategic narrative choice. He went further, questioning why no one in the royal household, medical professionals, or support systems intervened if the situation was as dire as described. Where were the doctors? Where was the hospital visit? Where was the emergency protocol? Morgan insisted that genuine suicidal ideation typically leads to immediate intervention, not silence followed by a high-profile media rollout. His refusal to accept Meghan's account led to a massive public backlash. Over 57,000 viewers filed formal complaints to Ofcom, the UK broadcasting regulator, the highest number in British television history. Critics accused Morgan of being dismissive of mental health issues, particularly for women and people of color, and of perpetuating harmful stigmas by publicly doubting a deeply personal disclosure. Supporters, however, praised Morgan for applying journalistic skepticism to a story he viewed as emotionally manipulative and commercially convenient. They argued that public figures should not be immune from scrutiny, especially when their revelations coincide with lucrative media deals. Believing someone is important, Morgan later said on his show Piers Morgan Uncensored, but so is asking questions. I'm not saying she didn't struggle. I'm saying the way the story was presented, timed, and monetized demands scrutiny. Morgan also also emphasized that his skepticism was not about denying the reality of mental health struggles, but about the lack of verifiable evidence or independent corroboration. "I've had my own battles with depression," he noted in a later interview, "so I know how serious it is. That's exactly why we shouldn't turn it into a political or financial tool." The fallout from his comments contributed to his departure from Good Morning Britain, though he maintained his stance and continued to critique what he sees as the commercialization of personal trauma in modern media. On his current platform, he frequently revisits the topic, analyzing clips from Meghan's Netflix documentary and public appearances, arguing that her lifestyle, luxury homes, designer fashion, and global travel contradicts the image of someone still recovering from profound psychological distress. Ultimately, Morgan's refusal to believe Meghan's mental health claims became symbolic of a deeper cultural divide between those who see her as a woman speaking truth to power and those who view her narrative as carefully curated for maximum emotional and financial impact. Whether seen as brave or cruel, his position underscores the challenges of discussing mental health in the public eye, where empathy, authenticity, and accountability often collide.